It's all built up to this, Hunger Games fans. Happy Hunger Games, and may the odds be ever in your favor. We're looking at the Ballad of Songbirds and Snakes, which was once again directed by Francis Lawrence, just like Catching Fire and both parts of Mockingjay were. And this is the prequel to the main Hunger Games trilogy. This is basically showing you an 18-year-old President Snow before he became President Snow. Here we see the antagonist of the main saga and his upbringing, how he eventually got into the office of President of Panem. Actually, I don't know if it gets that far, but it definitely shows you a lot of his ideologies that led to him becoming the president. So a young Coriolanus Snow, played here by Tom Blyth, remains the last hope for his fading lineage. With the 10th annual Hunger Games fast approaching, the young Snow becomes alarmed when he's assigned to mentor Lucy Gray Baird from District 12. Lucy Gray, of course, played here by the marvelous Rachel Zegler, who I've had nothing but praise for. Uniting their instincts for showmanship and political savvy, they race against time to ultimately reveal who's a songbird and who's a snake. Now, I was very excited for this as a Hunger Game fan. This movie, and with Francis Lawrence at the helm, like, it's been a few years since we've seen a Hunger Games movie in a theater, so I was definitely curious to see what he did with this book, which again is also very solid. And let's go ahead and start with the positives. Francis Lawrence continues to prove why he was the best choice to direct the Hunger Games from the very beginning, because the cinematography and the framing of his actors is pitch perfect. These forest scenes in District 12 are so beautiful to look at. The Capitol is so freaking majestic, maybe the best it's ever looked in a Hunger Games movie. And I gotta praise the production values on this movie. The old-timey feel of Panem is really neat. Although I was kind of an idiot watching it in the theaters, and I was looking at it like, this is the 10th annual Hunger Games. This is supposed to be after the North American continent was completely turned into dust and rubble. Wouldn't technology have been way more advanced by this point? But then I was an idiot, and then I remembered that the whole country was basically put underwater and they had to rebuild everything from scratch. So the old-timey feel of the games itself, Lucky Flickerman, played by Jason Schwartzman, being more of a radio announcer than a television host. And once you actually get into the arena itself for the actual Hunger Games, it is very exciting once you're in there. And Lawrence, once again, is helming this action with sheer perfection. I love how he gives you so many point of view shots from the perspective of Lucy Gray Baird. Excuse me when I say this, but technically speaking, the Ballad of Songbirds and Snakes is a marvel to look at on the big screen. Cinematography, again, editing, the score by James Newton Howard, again, feels so freaking epic in scope. Nothing technically wrong with this movie per se in terms of the production. The acting as well, across the board. There is not one bad performance in this Hunger Games movie. Tom Blyth as Coriolanus Snow, so freaking awesome. And he doesn't really have a whole lot of acting credits to his name. He's not necessarily a big-time star. I can see this movie turning Tom Blyth into a household name years down the line. That's a name to look out for. Because the way he presents this whole evolution of Snow, this is a guy who has been through the ringer. He's very clean cut, very handsome, very posh when you first meet him. And then once you get into the third act, he has to buzz all of his hair off, and he basically is drafted to go into the equivalent of the army, the peacekeepers, if you will. And my god, he gets to explore so much of this guy's personality. And I legitimately am curious. I actually have not heard any Tom Blyth interviews in the build-up to this to publicize the movie, but I'm legitimately curious if Tom Blyth actually watched a little bit of what Donald Sutherland did and kind of modeled his performance after that from the main saga. Because once you especially get towards the end of this movie, he looks like the spitting image of a young Donald Sutherland. Weird comparison, but it's almost like when you watch 17 again, when Zac Efron models himself exactly after Matthew Perry. I'm legitimately wondering if Blyth had that same outlook on the role. Regardless, he did marvelous. I can't wait to see what else he does down the line. Viola Davis as the head gamekeeper, Dr. Goll. She was so freaking fun to watch. The look of this character, the crazed look in her eyes, her unhinged nature. It's probably one of the most unique Viola Davis performances you will ever come across. There are many reasons why Viola Davis was already a legend before this movie even came out, And I feel like this performance is just another one to add to that long list of iconic performances. She was awesome. Peter Dinklage also joins in on the fun as a Game of Thrones alumni coming into the Hunger Games universe, especially after Natalie Dormer appeared in both Mockingjay flicks as Cressida. And I've said it before, Peter Dinklage was my favorite actor from Game of Thrones, and he was my favorite character from Game of Thrones in Tyrion, and it was so great to see him. It's a very small part, but it's a very interesting deep dive into a psyche of the guy who is actually the mastermind of creating the Hunger Games. Like, what sick motherfucker has the right frame of mind to put 24 kids in an arena and then force each other to fight to the death, basically to keep all the surrounding districts to the capital in line? This is very much a wolf in sheep's clothing performance, and Peter Dinklage pulls it off so well. Rachel Zegler is definitely very solid as Lucy Gray. It is very apparent why they cast, because she is the pure definition of a songbird with a beautiful singing voice. And yeah, even though this character may definitely seem like a precursor to Katniss Everdeen, even with the way she curtsies at the reaping ceremony, which isn't exactly a spoiler because that's in the trailer. I think she's definitely solid in the movie, but the character wasn't as interesting as I wanted her to be. And I don't know if that's because we're supposed to be focused on Snow and why he does the things that he does in the main saga, and the movie definitely places its focus where it should be, but I just kind of wish that there was a bit more development in this movie of the supporting characters. That way I could invest myself more in them. And I'll just say this, it is very apparent and very predictable once you meet Lucy Gray who is winning the Hunger Games. Especially if you're well-versed in the Hunger Games lore, especially if you read the books before going to the movies, you know who's winning in that arena. Even though it's very exciting and fascinating to see the development of the Hunger Games and how they grew into the phenomenon that it was, like, you do not need a soothsayer to tell you who is winning this game. But as far as how it's helmed, it is phenomenal to look at. I recommend definitely seeing this in IMAX if you decide to go and check it out. And it's very compelling to watch how the games actually develop behind the scenes. And it definitely raises some very fascinating political arguments that are written into this screenplay. Why are people not watching the Hunger Games anymore? And Suzanne Collins does a brilliant job of melding that political side to how people actually live their day-to-day lives. If they watch television, if they're not interested in the show anymore, if they find it boring, they're just gonna stop watching. And the Pan Am residents actually find the Hunger Games pretty stale. And I don't want to give anything away, but I was enraptured as how they basically talk about how they're going to revamp the game so that people will tune back in and the ratings will go sky high. That's still a very legitimate concern that a lot of television studios still have to this very day. And that's a testament to Suzanne Collins' writing. Which brings me into my biggest issue with Songbirds and Snakes. Okay, this third act, very important facet of the book. That part 3, The Peacekeeper, if you read the novel, yeah, you understand why it's there. But after all the discussions about ratings in the first act, the actual games itself in the second act, I'm sorry, the third act really derailed this movie's momentum. It's almost like, say you watch the first Hunger Games, you have Katniss and Peeta basically threatening to kill themselves so that nobody wins the Hunger Games. They have to have a victor, so they crown both Katniss and Peeta. There's only about 5 minutes of denouement after all that happens. In Songbirds and Snakes, the Hunger Games are over, and there's about another 45 minutes to an hour. And then when you get to the actual meat of the ending, which is a really nice ending, mind you, it just rushes it. Even though the ending sticks the landing, it's like, okay, President Snow does this, President Snow does that. Okay, we gotta go home. Yep, roll credits. That's it. There he is. There's President Snow. And it took me a second to register myself. I was like, wait, what? You spent all that time basically going through meandering District 12 for a while, and then you come to this ending? It's like the movie suddenly remembered what its main conflict was, and then boom, there it goes. And it works much better in the book, because you get a lot more development and a lot more insight into the character's psyche and what they're thinking. It doesn't really translate that well into the cinematic form, because when you tack on that third part to everything else that was so exciting before it, then it just kind of comes off like, okay, why are we still here? But regardless, I think if you're a Hunger Games fan, you will definitely enjoy it for what it is. As it sits, I mean, it's hard to say, because this movie definitely has a lot working for it. But what are people going to remember when they leave the theater? Why do superhero movies always put the fireworks at the very end? Because that's what people are going to remember forever. It's almost like Songbirds and Snakes had that ideology completely flip-flopped. They put all this stuff that people are going to remember at the beginning, and then the ending of the movie, it was like, yeah, you can stay if you want to. You can see what we think is captivating storytelling. But we're just going to keep you in here for another 45 minutes just to fill this very long runtime at 2 hours and 40 minutes. Yeah, I don't know. Maybe this would have worked better as a mini-series. Maybe if you split off the 3 parts of the book into 3 seasons on television, maybe that would have sufficed a little better. But I get it. Some people may have been concerned that they would be treading down the Hobbit realm where they go one book and turn it into 3 separate little projects in the cinematic world. But I just think that would have been better paced. All in all, you have some good stuff, some really good stuff in here, like Tom Blyth's coming out performance. But I gotta tell you, that 3rd act is not gonna make me want to go and rewatch Songbirds and Snakes like the main saga. I'm gonna give The Hunger Games, The Ballad of Songbirds and Snakes, a C+. And I'm sorry if that grade disappoints you guys. That was just how I felt leaving this theater. I wanted to like this movie way more than I did. And don't get me wrong, there were parts I really enjoyed, like the performances of Davis, Dinklage, and Blyth especially. But I just think translating this entire book into one movie, it just kind of felt the pacing was a bit uneven. And yes, I realize I'm coming off like a big hypocrite because I was advocating that Mockingjay should have been one movie instead of 2. But that was a different time in Hollywood. People did not care about Mockingjay Part 2 as much as they did The Force Awakens when that came out. So just put both Mockingjays into one movie, put it out, strike it while the iron's hot. Don't put out your finale a year too late. I think that's a completely different situation. Let me know what you thought of Songbirds and Snakes down in the comments section below. Is this your favorite of the Hunger Games series so far? I reviewed every single Hunger Games movie in the build-up to this flick. I have them all reviewed on the channel. If you want to check out that whole playlist, that would be awesome. Do consider subscribing. Tap on that thumbs up as well. That would be a huge help. It's a great community of film lovers and entertainment lovers over here, and y'all are invited to the party. Guys, y'all are the best. Stay tuned for more videos very soon. And with all that being said, Back Talk, commence.